The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and non-gender conforming American people. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is January the 10th, Wednesday, January the 10th, 2018. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, it's a pleasure to have this time to talk with you about what's happening in the news and what's happening in politics. As always, I'd like to thank our patrons, without whom this is not possible. Go to patreon.com/The BPD Show and become a patron today. A lot happening in the news. You, as always, can weigh in on the conversation, 857-600-0518, if you want to chime in, or you can leave a comment in the comment section, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever we're streaming. You can comment and we'll give some feedback. Up first, a lot of things happening in the news. I want to hit three of the topics that are happening as of the last 24 hours. Joe Arpaio out of Arizona. He's running for Senate. And to me, it's a give me to the Democratic Party. A lot of people disagree. A lot of people, particularly progressives, disagree with me. But I'll explain why I think this is a total give me for the Democrats. Steve Bannon is out at Breitbart. Man, I don't know what this dude is going to do next. So we'll talk about that. And then also North Carolina, gerrymandering. Interesting case. The panel of judges has declared what Republicans did in North Carolina to be illegal in so much as it helps Republicans disproportionately and intentionally. And so now they've been given 3 weeks to draw new boundaries. But this is an ongoing game. And this is one of the frontiers of justice. I can say justice is a frontier of anything that we want to accomplish. Gerrymandering, congressional districts, that's the number one way that Republicans use, maybe tied with voter suppression, maybe a close second with voter suppression, but the ramifications of districts and the lines being drawn, it can't be overstated how important it is this particular case is. And hopefully how this case impacts others, it really cannot be overstated how important it is. So again, I want you to weigh in on the conversation, 857-600-0518. Hello to everyone in the YouTube chat room. I see you. A couple of people in Facebook. Good morning. All right, so let's start with Joe Arpaio. Judge Arpaio, I think this race is a give me to the Democrats. Bakari Sellers tweeted from CNN. He tweeted yesterday a simple thank you to Joe Arpaio for jumping in his Twitter on Twitter on yesterday. Joe Arpaio announced his candidacy for the Senate. And he essentially said that he's running for one reason and one reason only, and that is to help Donald Trump with his agenda to make America great again. But it's a big joke. But the reason I think this is a give me to the Democrats is because it's not as though Donald Trump is in good standing across the United States. That's number one. Two, historically, the swings after a particular president gets into office always goes in the midterms to the opposing candidate. As always, that's always historically been the case. But three, Arizona is not a slam dunk Republican state. Jeff Flake won his race by 5 points. And to be sure, 5 points is definitive, but that's not a comfortable seat. That's not a seat where Republicans can relax. John McCain, he won his last race in 2016, he won by 15 points, which is a pretty comfortable position. It's still a statewide race, so we can draw some comparisons between that race and Jeff Flake's race. But ultimately, John McCain is a a household name in the echelons of the Clintons, right? So John McCain probably didn't have to run. Interesting enough, his seat will probably be up soon as well, just for other reasons. But, you know, this is not a slam dunk for Republicans with any candidate. And if you throw in Joe Arpaio being the criminal that he is, quite literally, you know, a pardoned criminal. The first person that Donald Trump pardoned was Joe Arpaio. He was found in contempt of court, criminal contempt of court, and was going to be sentenced to some time in jail. What's your boy? Donald Trump pardoned him. Excuse me, it's early in the morning. Donald Trump pardoned him. So he's a criminal, number one. But then two, he already has a long list of problems that are going to backfire on him, particularly when it comes to immigration. And this is where he was found in criminal contempt of court based on a Department of Justice report that went all the way back to 2011. In 2013, a judge ruled that he had to cease and desist with his racial profiling and his targeting of immigrants or targeting of minorities and immigrants. It's an interesting intersection there, but he refused to do that. And because of that, he was found in criminal contempt of court and he was to be sentenced. Donald Trump swooped in like granddaddy, white supremacist in chief, and pardoned him. Joe Arpaio is Arizona's Roy Moore. He's a criminal. He has, you know, a proven track record of bigotry and ignorance. And to me, this is, let me rephrase it then. For the people who disagree with me on the Democrats, I will say that this is the Democrats' race to lose. All the indicators, Jeff Flake was not a definitive win enough for him to run again. Not in the primaries, nor in the general election against the Democrat. And so this is the momentum that the Democrats, this is the wind that's going to go underneath the Democrats. It's in their court to lose. Now, if you want to think of it that way, yes, the Democrats can absolutely lose this, because if anyone is up to the task, I would say the Democrats. Democrats are up to the task of losing this race. Okay, I will give you that. But there's nothing, absolutely nothing standing in the way of Democrats winning this seat except for Democrats. And I think we should all but agree there. But the idea that Donald Trump has coattails, I think that's what I push back against the hardest. Donald Trump doesn't have coattails anymore. Donald Trump's reputation is crap. Donald Trump's achievements, he's at a 33. The last I checked, I saw a number come across Twitter that said he's at 29%. The last time that I checked, and I guess I could check now with Real Clear Politics, but Donald Trump's approval ratings are so low, they're getting at a threshold where Republicans can legitimately consider primarying him without any serious ramifications. Of course, they'll face Donald Trump's Twitter timeline. But in terms of blowback from the citizens, Donald Trump does not have the support that he thinks that he has. And because of that, I think that this is a good indicator that Joe Arpaio trying to run on the coattails of Donald Trump is really a give me to the Democrats. It's theirs to lose. They are equal to the task. I will admit again, for the record, that he's equal to the task the Democrats rather are equal to the task of losing against Arizona's Roy Moore. But it's theirs to lose. There's nothing in Arizona that indicates that I said Roy Moore, but there's nothing in Arizona that indicates that Joe Arpaio is the type of candidate that would be able to rise above the coattails that he's trying to ride in on. All right, so the Real Clear average of polls for Donald Trump, 56% disapprove, and he's actually up to 40% approval. So still a vast majority of Republicans. He's got a post-Christmas bump, but the vast majority of Americans disapprove of his performance. And with that being said, I think it's very important for Americans, not just Democrats, but Americans to galvanize and capitalize on this moment, to galvanize this moment and to capitalize on this moment, because historically, this is how it always goes. You're going to get that swing. So it's very important. I think the most critically important thing that we could do is divide the government in 2018. And this gives the Democrats another opportunity to pick up a seat that they otherwise could have lost very easily if they had, for instance, I think Jeff Flake might be making, Jeff Flake, here's the problem, and this is the general problem that goes across every party, particularly the Republican Party, every election. Getting out of your primaries is the challenge. General election, Jeff Flake, as extreme as he is, because I don't believe in any, there's no such thing as a moderate Republican, right? There's no such thing as a moderate Republican, but Jeff Flake, compared to the primary that he would have had to face, appears moderate. And so the general election would have been something that I think Jeff Flake could have won again as for Senate in Arizona, but he can't get out of his primaries. The Arizona Tea Partiers, if they still call themselves that, but Arizona, the base, the fundamentalist base of the Republican Party in Arizona, they may not vote for Jeff Flake. They're going to vote for someone like Joe Arpaio, but Joe Arpaio is going to have a harder time in the general election. This does not mean that the Democrats can rest on their laurels. They're going to have to get out, all hands on deck, and pound the pavement and work just as hard. I mean, they're trying to turn a state that's been red for almost 30 years in terms of the Senate seats. It's been red just as long as Alabama was. I think the last Democratic senator from the state of Arizona was somewhere around 1977, 1987, one of those. And I know that's a big gap, but at least 1987. So we're talking about 30 solid years since there's been a Democrat. So the same type of effort that they took in Alabama to get the seat for Roy Moore, you get the same opportunity here, albeit Joe Arpaio, in so much as we know he's not a pedophile, but he's a convicted criminal. That's some pretty good fodder for Democrats to operate on. All right, 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. Let's shift gears and talk about Steve Bannon. Oh, before I go on, to the podcast listeners, if you're listening to this podcast today, it was my mistake. I did not upload the podcast from yesterday until this morning. So you're going to get two podcasts on today. You already have one from yesterday, the 9th. You're going to get this podcast on the 10th today. So if you're listening to this on the 10th, remember that you can go back and download yesterday's episode. That has already been uploaded as well. 857-600-0518. Steve Bannon. I'm not really sure what Steve Bannon is going to do now that he's out at Breitbart. He's not exactly the kind of character that can survive outside of his bubble. What I mean by that is, like, I legitimately, and most people reasonably can go from one industry to the next, right? If I left this political game, I can go back into marketing, go back to corporate America and do okay. Probably, I don't know, might do better. Let me think about that. But anyway, I don't think Steve Bannon can do that. He's too toxic. And now he's been outed at at Breitbart, which was his baby. That was his home base. He left the White House to go back to Breitbart, or he was fired from the White House, and he felt no problem. I can go right back to Breitbart and pick up a check and do what he has what he has to do to survive. The website announced on yesterday that Steve Bannon was out. And this is what the article on Breitbart said. This is a quote directly from Steve Bannon. He said, quote, "I am proud of what the Breitbart team has accomplished in so short a period of time in building out a world-class news platform that is the central," end quote. My commentary here. That is the central hub of the alt-right, of they've mainstreamed the bigotry, they've mainstreamed trolls, they've mainstreamed people like Milo Yiannopoulos, they gave voice to that entire platform. Now, I will say that in such a short amount of time, because of the character of the president, they were integral in electing this president. I will give Breitbart that. They are a very influential organization, but to call themselves a world-class news platform, they're nothing more. Breitbart is nothing more than a glorified clickbait website. I mean, take a clickbait website on the left and put enough money behind it, and you get the same exact results. I mean, that's literally all they are. If you look at the headlines, there's nothing world class about them. But that's besides the point. Internally, they seem to be shocked, at least according to a CNN report. Dave Sirius has ended the relationship with Breitbart, with Steve Bannon on the Breitbart news show. So Steve Bannon, I don't know what this dude is going to do. I mean, do you see Steve Bannon, going to a corporate job? Do you see Steve Bannon being able to capitalize on his political consulting? No. I think this is the end of Steve Bannon. He's already lost the support of his millionaire funders. He made the ultimate mistake of crossing Donald Trump when the majority of the reason people even know who Steve Bannon is was because of Donald Trump. In terms of national notoriety, it's only because of Donald Trump. Someone tweeted on Twitter, and they said Steve Bannon has fallen from heaven or something like that. And the reference is to it's a biblical reference, and I think it was rather apropos. In a twisted way, they are saying that Steve Bannon was like Lucifer, who challenged God and was thrown out of heaven. And so Steve Bannon had the vanity and the gall to challenge his master and was subsequently thrown not only out of the White House, but thrown out of his own platform, Breitbart.com. Ben Shapiro on Twitter said that the only thing he regrets is the stain that Steve Bannon is left on Breitbart. And that's funny because Breitbart was already the shit stain of America's underwear. That's the only way to describe it. There was nothing magnanimous about that site. Steve Bannon was a perfect fit. Steve Bannon is the heir apparent of, was it Andrew Breitbart? The same type of character, the same type of presentation. Both of them were frumpy. Both of them were disheveled. Both of them coddled bigotry and elevated bigotry. There's nothing redeemable about There's nothing great and redeemable about Breitbart.com, such that you feel like Steve Bannon there was a mistake. Being there was a mistake. No, Steve Bannon fit right there at Breitbart.com. There's a reason he was there. The reason he was so successful there. That's because Breitbart.com is the bottom. They are the bottom feeders of society, and they just happen to get to a space. First, Breitbart has been around for a long time. So in the conservative blogosphere, they got to a space, they filled that space, they got some corporate dollars behind them, and they capitalize on clickbait. It's not rocket science. It's not. I mean, quite honestly, it's a proven formula. Clickbait sells. You get your audience on Facebook, you get some money behind it for some advertisement, rather. The real challenge is getting that initial boost, getting that initial platform. And what they did was they capitalized on it. They brought in even more sensationalized voices like Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo actually elevated Breitbart to a level that Steve Bannon and Breitbart himself couldn't do. So it's all a formula, but I'm not sure where they go from here other than just to maintain their clickbait farm, which is all they are. So that's it. Steve Bannon's future does not look bright. No pun intended. It looks as though I really want to see where he's going to go from here because I do not think that he has the ability to move to a different industry or to get away. More than that, I don't think that he has the ability to get away from the exposure that he has, the type of exposure that he received. He can't get away from his persona, and nobody in the Republican Party wants him. He's taken the fall for the Alabama race. Think about the difference between the guy who, what's the guy? He's off the radar now. The guy that helped get George W. Bush elected. It'll come to me. But, you have some consultants who go all the way to the top, go to the White House, and when they come out, they're still trusted. They still get funders behind them. They still get millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of dollars behind them, and they can operate in a space, win or lose. Not Breitbart, but Steve Bannon went to the stratosphere, came down just as quick, and even lost Breitbart. It doesn't look good for him, which is good, right? Because to me, you should not be rewarded for being a malignant, cancerous, open pussing sore on humanity. That's what he is. That's what Breitbart is. And ultimately, Breitbart, so long as there's going to be millions of Americans who identify with that type of ideology, Breitbart will always be there. But the people who leave there, where the hell are they going to go? I was going to say it's like doing porn, but I don't want to, try to slam on sex workers in that way. But it's like, certain industries you can go to, and when you come out, you can't really do anything else. When you leave Breitbart, where the hell are you going to go? Doesn't look too good. All right, 857-600-0518. Let's go to a more, Karl Rove. Thank you, Jose Garcia. Karl Rove was the guy. He helped George W. Bush get elected. He went all the way to the White House. He got hundreds of millions of dollars to run campaigns. He lost the 2012 election in a spectacular fashion, but he's still out there consulting. He's still out there making money. There was space for him even after his failure. Look at how long his run was, 2000 to 2012. Karl Rove, as a political consultant and advisor to the president, had a 12-year run. Steve Bannon's run was 12 months? Maybe 12 months? Anyway, 857-600-0518. I'm sorry if I sound giddy about him losing his job. But the only thing that would have been better than Steve Bannon losing his job would be for Steve Bannon to stay at Breitbart and wage an all-out war against Donald Trump. That's the only thing that would be better. But apparently those 40% of people who still approve of Donald Trump are concentrated in and around Breitbart.com. All right, let's move on to something a little more substantive here. The North Carolina gerrymandering. This is an important story, probably the most important story we're going to have in a long time. And I'm just going to read some notes here from the New York Times. A panel of federal judges, or an article from the New York Times. A panel of federal judges struck down North Carolina's congressional map on yesterday, condemning it as unconstitutional because Republicans had drawn the map seeking a political advantage. The ruling was the first time that a federal court had blocked a congressional map because of a partisan gerrymander. Judge James Wynn Jr. Had a 191-page opinion about it, said that the Republicans in North Carolina's legislature had been, quote, motivated by invidious partisan intent as they drew the state's congressional districts. The result, Judge Wynn wrote, violated the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection. The ruling demands, this is important, the ruling demands Republican-dominated legislature redraw their maps by January 24th. He essentially gave them 3 weeks because we're getting ahead of the midterm elections, and not just midterm, but congressional elections in the midterm. And they have 3 weeks, Republicans have 3 weeks to redraw the line so that as people file, they will be filing for districts that are not grossly gerrymandered. The court, according to the New York Times, the court also ordered an independent expert to begin preparing an alternate map. Republicans in North Carolina are challenging the decision. They're appealing the decision, so they're attempting to get away with this map. They declared that they did not gerrymander it for a political advantage, which is clearly the case. This is exactly what they've done. This is what they do historically. And the problem is that the Democratic Party has lost so many legislatures across the country. The Democrats are almost, there's irreparable damage that has been done to congressional maps over the last probably since 2000, but definitely over the last 10 years, the last 8 years, where they lost 1,000 seats across the country. The problem is when you lose on the state level, when you don't pay attention to the state level politics, you 100% give the advantage on the national level to the opposition party, to the Republican Party. So in President Obama's neglect of state legislatures, this gave Republicans an advantage on the national level. And this is playing out in North Carolina. So this is why it's critically important for Democrats to have that 50-state strategy, but not just 50-state strategy for the hopes of getting the White House, but a 50-state strategy for the hopes of getting state legislatures. Without that, you cannot get a fair shot at a Congress, at a House of Representatives that is actually reflective of the population. They're masters of gerrymandering. They have absolutely no problem creating safe seats for Democrats, particularly around black communities. They overpopulate. They draw the lines where they isolate off all the black community in one district, and that guarantees that a black representative, generally a Democrat, is going to get represented there, get elected there without any challenger for years to come. But by concentrating them all in one district, you're not putting them in competition in other districts. And that's just one example of gerrymandering. There's multiple methods of gerrymandering, and they have historically done this. Democrats have done this too. The problem is that over the last 16 years, it's overwhelmingly been done by Republicans, particularly in the last 8 years, because of the fact that Democrats do not have power on the state level in any substantive fashion. I mean, we're almost at the point in the life of the Democrat of America, in the life of America, in the life of the Democratic Party. We're almost at the point where the Republicans can call a constitutional convention and they have a majority of state legislatures and state governor seats to actually propose a constitutional amendment. I mean, we're really far gone in this way. And it's super important that we not allow our politics to only be nationalized, right? When all you think about, and this is the nature of our politics. This is the nature of Democratic politics specifically. Republicans, they do nationalize the races, but they run like hell on the state level. Democrats, they generally focus on national news, national issues. Not that they're not important, they are important, but they neglect these local and state races. And this has given the ability to, this has given an advantage to the Republicans like we've never seen, such that now Democrats, if you want to win and change how districts are gerrymandered, you can barely get into power because the people in power have created the rules and they've drawn the lines on the maps to ensure that you never get in power. Same thing with voter suppression. You give Republicans power, or you allow them to get this power on the state level almost unchallenged, and then they create an environment where they create rules and they create barriers to voting. So now not only are you going against the headwinds of a gerrymandered district, you're going against the headwinds of voter ID laws that are meant to disenfranchise so many millions of Americans. It's a formula. It's a formula, and it's a map, and it's a game plan that they have been implementing for a very long time. They have long-term goals for America, and they are working on them Seriously, they are working on them one day at a time with a laser-like focus. And here we are almost at the culmination of these things. All right. There's a lot more to go, a lot more to talk about. I'm going to have to cover more of this later on tomorrow. I'm actually out of time for you today. We'll be back tomorrow. Make sure that you download the podcast from yesterday. The full show will be back tomorrow with a full hour, and we want you to chime in. To all the callers who are calling in, I apologize. I had to restart the entire system, and so we'll get your calls and your comments on tomorrow. Make sure you go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. So many more things I really want to talk to you about, but I've got to go. Let me make sure that I can do this, and I'll see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.